You've heard officers say, I've got your six, which means I've got your back in a dangerous situation. But here's a question. Who has their 12? Who's watching the mental and emotional front of your family before the storm hits? Because if you wait until your spouse is in a black hole, it's already too late. Having someone who sees what's coming before it hits is just as important as having someone behind you in danger. And today we're going to talk about that. Welcome to Code 44. My name is Amy Cortez. I'm a mother of two and a spouse of a law enforcement officer. This podcast is designed to help spouses and families recognize the sign and break the silence before the line breaks. In episode 4, we talked about code word, giving your loved one time and space to unpack and then communicate at the right time. But here's the reality. There are moments when the trauma your spouse is carrying becomes too heavy for you alone. And when that weight spills onto you, your world can go spiraling, even when they appear to be very calm. That's where your village matters. As I was raising kids, I often used to say, it takes a village, and boy does it. And I also believe supporting the law enforcement officer's mental health also takes a village. But here's the tricky part. The stigma makes our spouses terrified to let others in. And as much as I want to ignore the stigma, it's real. And we have to understand how to navigate our loved ones within that mindset. The stigma makes them think they have to suffer in silence and make us as spouses and family fearful too. They're afraid people will judge them. They're afraid it'll cost them their career. They're afraid that somebody will feel like they can't do their job. Can't just pick random people to help when we as spouses and family don't know what to do, but we know that it's more than we are capable of handling on our own. So we have to build a village, one that is safe, one that is approved and agreed upon by your law enforcement officer, a village that respects confidentiality and knows how to support without prying for more. And also someone who understands the job or understands you and your spouse. So it's critical that we together as a unit have the support system in place for our loved ones. Something that we agree to up front. Something that your spouse is not going to feel violated so that you don't lose their trust and respect. First, I want to talk about timing. In grade school, on a regular basis, we would have fire drills. I'm sure you remember those too, or maybe you're living it right now with your children. And because I'm in Ohio, we also had tornado drills. The purpose was to ensure that if the situation would take place, such as a tornado, everyone knew where to go and what to do. In my day, we went into a hallway and put a book over our head. I know I'm showing my age, but nonetheless, that is what they decided was the safest place. And so we practiced it. Because if we would have waited until there was a tornado on the front steps, I can guarantee you there would be pure panic, and anything that we did in the moment would have been a complete reaction and probably not the smartest and safest thing to do. My husband often makes fun of me because he says, in case of an emergency, I'm the last person to go to because I get a little frazzled. I honestly think it's just because I know he's got everything under control. The same concept of a tornado drill applies to family in law enforcement. If we wait until your spouse or loved one is in a black hole, or until you're falling apart, or until the trauma is overwhelming, it's too late to start building the plan at that moment. And as I said, maybe I'm not the most calm person in a crisis. But for Mike and I, we had to define our village when things were calm, not chaotic, and that we both were thinking rationally. For Mike and me, we established what I refer to as an upfront agreement. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a group chat and it's not a venting circle. We all have those venting friends and we all need those venting friends. But those individuals are probably not likely the person we are talking about in these situations. This isn't where you dump all of the details. Sometimes I refer to that as a show up and throw up. No. Your village is a list of mutually agreed upon individuals. I urge you to have at least 2, maybe 5, that you can quietly activate when things feel off or just too much. The key word that I just said, quietly activate. When I activate someone from the village, I usually just say something simple, such as, hey, Mike's a little off right now, maybe a little bit more reserved. Could you check on him this week? Or if there was a situation on the job that I think Mike is struggling with, can you just casually reach out to him? So I ask you, who's your village? For me, Mike and I created a list so that depending on the situation, I could call on them. I'll be clear, I don't activate the village regularly, or at least I haven't had to. Because remember, these are the times where the things going on is just more than what we can handle alone. But I have his approval and I'm not violating his trust. So to give you an idea, here's some of the individuals we've established, and maybe this will help you establish yours. A trusted friend, someone who knows the law enforcement officer well enough to support them without needing a lot of details. This might not be their best friend. Think about this one together and come up with the friend that you agree to. Another person we have on the list is someone who has done the job. They feel as law enforcement that no one understands except someone who does the job. And they might be right. As spouses, we can only speculate about the situation and what they're feeling and what they've experienced. So agree to another law enforcement officer. Maybe it's one that's retired or it could be one that's active, but someone who they trust and you trust mutually that knows the weight behind the badge. Our third member that we personally identified was a pastor, or for you, it might be a spiritual mentor. Because sometimes the battles they face is a spiritual warfare. I've heard Mike say, I should have, insert into the blank, or I failed at, insert in the blank. I wasn't able to do X. In my terms, it was Mike saying he wasn't able to be the superhero he wanted to be. So a pastor or a spiritual mentor in these types of situations can speak truth. They can provide that healthy reminder that as humans, we really are not in control. And boy, is that a hard one for me. Our spouses have been called to this occupation for a purpose, but they can't play a superhero and save everyone. Therefore, putting those things back in perspective is important and needed. And that person usually cannot be us as a spouse or a family member. The next person we have on our list is a counselor. Whether they see a counselor regularly or only when they need it, this is a critical part of a village. And finding a counselor that they're going to connect with sometimes takes time. So if they're in a dark place, that is not usually the time to start finding a counselor. I've never called or connected with Mike's counselor. I've encouraged him to reach out when I feel like he might be stuck. That can be a little touchy because sometimes, let's face it, they feel like we might be nagging. So I typically, in my most loving, caring, soft voice, will say, "Hey, honey, I think you could benefit from seeing your counselor to unpack this." Or sometimes after major events, I'll say, "Are you going to call Doc Joe? Or am I?" And the last one I would recommend is a support group or a faith-based life group. I was having a conversation with another spouse, just a casual conversation, that she had mentioned that her spouse wanted to join a group that was hosted by their church, and it was specifically for first responders. And our conversation led into some true feelings that she was verbalizing. She shared that while she supported him going to the event, she would prefer if they would go to something together. I thought a lot about this over the next few weeks because I can see myself in that situation where I want Mike to open up to me, to share with me what's going on and how he's feeling. But in reality, he wants to shield me from some of that, from some of the horror that is in his mind. I think it's important for us to encourage them to join support groups or life groups. Sure, every spouse on here probably would prefer to do something together because they're gone a lot and we just want to connect. However, it takes a village, and sometimes they don't want to lay those burdens on us. So let's encourage them to be part of any group that they feel connected, because at the end of the day, we really just want them to be okay. Sometimes I feel like the distance I sense with Mike is really not distance. It's protection of him trying to protect me from the trauma that he has faced and that he sees in his mind. Now that you're thinking about your village, I want to talk about how we use our village. First off, the law enforcement officer has to approve the village ahead of time. It's the only way it will work. They can't be blindsided because if we do, we will lose their trust quickly and they will shut down on us. Next, you never give the full details when you are connecting with the people in your village. Your message is short, something along the lines of, "Hey, he or she seems a little bit off. Can you check in on them?" You see, we want them, the law enforcement officer, to open up to this individual from their perspective. You might ask why. Well, have you ever painted a story for somebody, but when somebody else tells a story, it's completely different? I think they might refer to that as the telephone game. Your village people, did you see what I did there? Your village people need to hear the story from your loved ones firsthand. Our third rule: never activate somebody outside of the approved list. This will destroy the trust instantly, and they will stop sharing with you and will shut you completely out. So this is an important one. Make sure you remember the village doesn't fix them. It doesn't fix the situation. They simply check up on them and allow their words to hit the air, which we all know provides some type of comfort. The goal is to help them open up to someone and not force them to open up to you. I know that one hurts, and I have tried to force Mike to open up to me multiple times, and it doesn't work. It pushes him darker into a deep hole. As we've talked about, loneliness doesn't come from having no one around. So, why does all of this matter? As spouses and family, we carry pieces of their trauma too. And sometimes it's just too much. There are moments where his trauma makes my world spiral. even though his world looks normal. So here's what I have found. I need a village for me as much as he needs one for him. I'm going to share a situation that is emotional and sensitive, but it's a moment that our village came together for Mike and me because I feel if I want to break the stigma and help you through things your family member might be experiencing, you have to know that this isn't theory, that the things that I'm talking about, this is the life I live with my law enforcement officer. And this is the world that you live in with your law enforcement officer. So we're in this together, and I'm committed to sharing stories in hopes that you can relate. My husband is willing to have his stories shared because he is so passionate about the mental health of law enforcement. So I'm going to share an example of how the village really came together for us. Mike had a really tough situation at work, like the worst type of loss. Not that there's any good loss or easy loss, but it was one that hit him at his darkest, deepest place. A loss of one of their own. At the scene, I cannot even try to visualize what was happening, but it was a point where it must have just consumed him. Mike removed himself from the scene just for a brief moment, and he called me. He doesn't call me very often during the day, so when I saw that it was him calling, I answered right away, but I didn't hear anything. And I kept saying, hello? Hello? And I started to think, well, maybe he accidentally dialed me. Maybe his phone was in the pocket and he didn't really mean to dial me. But something just in me told me to hang on the line. So I just waited there for a moment. I was quiet. And then I heard him say in a voice that I'd never heard before, I'm here. That's all he said. I'm here. Wives, you know that gut-wrenching feeling of, oh my goodness, what just happened? I said, honey, are you okay? He said, it's bad. It's really, really bad. But I just need 1 minute, and I needed to hear your voice. I said, okay, I'm here. And I was just quiet. And I just stayed quiet, and I let him take time and take his breath. And it probably was 30 seconds. And then he said, okay, I'm all right. I have to go. I have to be there for my guys. And he hung up. So you can imagine my mind was racing, but all I could do was just pray at that time. He got home super late that night. But from the moment he walked in the door, I just knew as he started to share the details that this was going to be all encompassing. The look in his eye was already there. Spouses, you know exactly the look I'm talking about, where their physical body is there, but their eyes just show that they are not there. It had already pulled him into a deep place. I immediately asked him, hey, do you want me to reach out to Doc Joe, his counselor? He said, I already texted her and I go tomorrow at 5, which I was so thankful for. But I also could tell that his thinking was already headed down the I should have or I wish I would have. I knew that he was falling into a dark place, and I know that that is a slippery slope. So in the morning, I contacted our village. I reached out to our pastor, because I knew he was going to need him. I just simply said, hey, something big happened yesterday. Can you please reach out to Mike when you have a moment? He responded with, got it. I also reached out to someone that had done the job because they knew what he was going through. And again, I just said, hey, something big happened yesterday. Do you think you could take a moment and reach out to Mike? And he responded with, got it. For this situation, we engaged 3 village people. It really depends on the situation as to who we engage. But when you define them up front, you know exactly in the moment who you need to go to. each one of them provided a different type of support and different words that he needed for the situation. I have no idea what they talked about. I don't know their conversation, but what I do know is weeks later, Mike communicated that each person had reached out. Now, I never said, hey, I contacted them, because I didn't need to. We have an agreement and it worked. And his words hit the air and he slowly processed it. Wow. That story hits hard every time I think about it. But here's my hope for you. Sometime this week, sit down with your spouse and choose your village. Pick the people who you trust, who are safe and are approved together before you need them. In the moment of crisis, as we discussed, clarity is the first thing to disappear. If anything that I said today was helpful, please subscribe on YouTube or click follow on whatever platform you're listening to. That's how you'll be notified the moment that I release a next episode. And it also helps bring exposure to the podcast to more law enforcement families who need it. There's no fees of subscribing. So I'm going to end us with a prayer. Lord, we ask for your guidance as we create our village of support. Show us who is safe, who is trustworthy, and who can walk beside us in the hardest moments. Protect our marriages and our families, guard our hearts, and give us the courage to reach out before crisis hits. Amen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for fighting for your family. And thank you for being a part of this growing community of spouses who refuse to let the silence win. I hope you'll catch me on a next episode of Code 44.